The leopard face culture is the one which have no feathers in the head, and this is important for its feeding with their powerful bill. They cut the skins and break the bones to feed from the soft tissue inside the carcass. When they feed from the carcass, they get dirty. So this is the small feathers or small downy in this area is being renewed quickly. So this will make them easy for cleaning. The dirty one will come out and will have a new feather. So this is good for regarding adaptation for their feeding.
Unfortunately, like so many other animals of the Arabian Peninsula, the vultures are in decline. Roosting and nesting sites have been severely reduced by increasing agriculture and urbanization, particularly through pesticide spraying to control locusts. For the same reasons, the native mammals on which they feed have also been reduced, and conservationists are increasingly concerned. But history is full of loss too. Amongst the most impressive birds of its time was the Arabian ostrich, now sadly extinct in the wild due to overhunting. The Arabian ostrich had such similarities with the African species that the African red-legged ostrich is now being reintroduced in various parts of Arabia. The NCWCD have also been very successful in breeding ostrich at Mahazat, and prospects for its long-term return seem viable. The largest bird in the desert, and indeed the world, the flightless ostrich may soon become a distinctive sight in some desert reserves, though it has yet to be observed fulfilling the myth of burying its head in the sand. There are currently 5 species of gazelle living throughout the Arabian Peninsula and 2 subspecies resulting from isolation. Whilst there are affinities with African species, gazelles have been present in Arabia since their earliest evolution. The Gazella arabica, known locally as idmi or mountain gazelle, with a dark brown strip down the side of its body, is found in wadis, on the tops of escarpments and along acacia plains. In fact, the fate of this species is intrinsically linked to the acacia tree's own cycle of life. The acacia's seeds and pods are high in protein and phosphorus, and thus form an important part of the gazelle's diet. They use their sense of smell to locate food and rarely need to drink, as they obtain all their moisture needs from the vegetation they consume.
The seeds themselves are very nutritious, and in the case of Acacia tortilis, the pod is also nutritious. And you'll often see idmi hoovering them up on the ground underneath the acacias.
Highly territorial, idmi groups are made of maternity herds, bachelor male herds, and territorial solitary males. These males continually mark their territory with a wax-like substance from glands below the eye, which they rub onto bushes, branches, or stones.
The idmi is an animal which is losing habitat probably as fast as any terrestrial species in Saudi Arabia. They are areas which in the old days were probably less prone to use by humans because they are quite broken. The idmi can get away. But now we're getting housing development in many of the mountain areas. We're getting much, much more intensive use of those areas for all sorts of things, including recreation.
The other most common gazelle species found here is Gazella subgutturosa marica, known as reem, or the Arabian sand gazelle, so called because of its color, helping it to blend in with the open sandy plains where it lives. This gazelle has relatives in Iraq, Iran, parts of the former Soviet Union, and even Mongolia. The reem characteristically form herds. Till as late as the 1940s, it was even then possible to come across migrating herds of 10,000 gazelles in the Rub al Khali. Today, finding a group of 10 or more is considered a rare fortune. On the edge of extinction less than 30 years ago in Arabia, due to massive hunting raids, it has taken concerted conservation efforts to bring the gazelle back to the relatively sustainable numbers at which they now exist. From an initial population of 50, the stock now numbers 500. If their current rate of reproduction increases, perhaps in a matter of decades, we could see at least a couple of herds numbering in their hundreds. However, this has not been achieved without complications for conservationists such as Professor Iyad Nader, director of the King Khalid Wildlife Research Center and home of Saudi Arabia's gazelle captive breeding program.
The main aim of the center was to maintain and breed some of the native wildlife of Saudi Arabia. Mainly two species of gazelles, the sand gazelle, the reem, and the mountain gazelle, the idmi. These animals were almost at the edge of extinction. Their numbers and their distribution areas were reduced to a minimum.
Captive breeding programs were the first step in the preservation of these beautiful animals. Captive breeding is when a species is collected together and held in a breeding center, where scientists try to stimulate ideal environmental conditions to encourage the animal to mate. This often includes artificial insemination. With so few animals left in the wild, these programs had to rely on international private collections for breeding stock. This created other problems. With so many different populations and even species of gazelle from different sources, breeding them together could severely weaken the genetic pool and even lead to extinction unless scientists could be certain of their origins and genetic compatibility. If animals from two different species are bred together, then the bloodline can be weakened, or they can produce offspring that will in turn be sterile.
Each of these rows is the sequence of a DNA molecule. So as you can see here,
in order to identify an animal correctly, genetics are used.
The first way is to define what we call conservation units on the ground, to go out and find out which populations of animals are similar to other populations. So we can perhaps, the best way to put it is to draw lines between populations, saying this group is different than this group. Therefore, we must pay attention to both of those for conservation efforts. We can't just consider them the same thing. Genetics is a great way to go in and determine that. Another aspect of genetics to the conservation efforts here is the captive breeding programs we have. And again, we need to know what it is we've got behind fences so we can have the proper animals breeding together, and so we can take captive bred animals and put them in the right places in the environment. We don't want to put animals into an area that didn't belong there in the first place. That would really not help our cause at all.
After genetically identifying animals of the same species, it became relatively easy to breed the animals in captivity and to produce genetically healthy reproductive populations. They could then start thinking about reintroduction into the wild, or